Just a couple more people joining from the waiting room, so we'll give them a minute to get themselves set up, and we will crack on. James just joining, and then we'll get into it. Okay, I think we'll get going. Good evening, everybody. Welcome along. My name's Chris Mundell. I'm the Sport Development Manager here at TNZ New Zealand. I am joined this evening, who you'll probably see floating around, by Charlotte Guscott-Gregory, who's our RTO Development Manager. I have Ellie Telford, who a lot of you will know through her role as our Club Support Manager. And sitting alongside us tonight, there's a bit of a special guest, is Chris Hall, who is a Tennis New Zealand board member and has been integral in the drafting and support and writing up of these constitution templates. So he's a lawyer by trade. We've brought in the big guns, especially for these kind of conversations. Thank you all for making the time and coming along tonight. I can see a few familiar faces from our previous webinar, which is awesome. We've obviously got more things to discuss and questions, which is fantastic. For those of you who are new, this is our second webinar for the year. We ran a very similar format a couple of weeks ago. The recording of that and the detailed question and answers that came from that session are up on our website, and I recommend, if your question may not be answered tonight or you might need more information, diving into that, because it's a good resource as well. As I said, the aim of tonight is to sort of hear and understand from you, our clubs, who are out there working through the process of the Constitution template updating process, and to understand your questions and queries around that. You'll notice there is a chat feature. Please, throughout the night, I'll try wherever possible to direct questions from those who either have their hand up or I can see with their hand up. But if not, don't be afraid to put your question into the chat. We will also answer through those as we can. And if we don't get to your question tonight, like we did last time, we will endeavour to answer it and post all of the questions and answers under the webinar as well, so you can go back and reference those. So hopefully it's all very simple. I'm going to spend probably 2 or 3 minutes to talk through how we've got to where we are from our first Constitution Club template that we released a wee while ago now to the version 7 that we have currently, that you are out hopefully using and starting to work on. So bear with me. I'll just share my screen for 2 seconds. This one here, and hopefully that comes up to everybody. So what we're looking at here is a summary of what we heard from the feedback. So throughout this process, Tennis New Zealand has worked with our regions, has listened to clubs, has listened to our associations, etc., around the template initially, and gathered a number of feedback that has gone into our drafting of the most recent version. There have been a number of iterations, and that has come from the feedback we've heard of. Those are the 4 key areas that, apologies, don't that we heard from. One, that the length was quite significant. It is a shock from what many clubs have now. The template sits at about 22 pages. It can be brought down to about 19 or so based on what your club needs, but it is predominantly longer than what many of your clubs probably have currently. We heard that a lot of it was unclear. There are a lot of things that they were unsure of. There are a lot of things that weren't necessarily described, and clubs may have found them new to understand. So we've gone back and worked through that. The complexity was a big part of this. You know, it's hard to work through. There's quite a lot of legalese. These are constitutions. They are quite legal, heavy documents. There seem to be a bunch of unnecessary elements. And that last one, that it felt very TNZ down, that it was very compliance driven, and that it had a large amount of compliance in it. What we reflected in the new template, you know, we have streamlined the length. We've made it more concise where we can. We've tried to present the different sections more systematically, trying to reduce the ambiguity, generally just trying to make it more user-friendly. Where possible, we've used clearer terminology, simplified some of the legal phrasing, things like this. And from a compliance point of view, we have tried wherever possible to remove the TNZ side and those explicit compliance requirements to give your clubs a lot more optionality within the template and the ability to adapt it to the needs of your club. Some of the specific changes, we've introduced transition regulations. This will be a change for a lot of clubs. There will be a shift from one constitution to another to try and support you with that. We've consolidated and streamlined some of the governance processes, understanding that the requirements at a national body level, at TNZ level, weren't necessarily applicable at local club level. So we've tried to streamline those where we can. We've really tried to clarify some of the processes around the committee governance piece and giving committee a bit more flexibility in the financial space. As I said, there's a more detailed video on our website that goes through the differences between version 1 and version 7. If you never saw version 1, if you have only ever seen the most recent version, then you're sweet as, don't need to go backwards. But for those who are wondering where the changes are and what we've done to listen to the feedback, this is what we look at. These are the 4 main modernising tennis changes that we're working through in these constitution templates that you'll see come through. And we can discuss more of those tonight, and a lot of those questions will come from there. We have our digital membership management. So this formalises the use of clubs to use a digital system. That could be Club Spark, that could be a number of other commonly used programs like Hello Club, like Pay to Play, etc. And that's about needing it to connect to the national database. System-wide membership, the shift now is that all participants, both members, casuals and parents, need to become members of the club as part of this new model. And we can discuss that in a bit more detail. And then obviously still allowing clubs to determine the rights and obligations of those membership categories and who is a voting and non-voting member. We know this is a shift for some clubs, and so that's what we're setting these webinars up to help explain, help understand. The Modernising Tennis Hub, which is on our website, has a huge amount of information and understanding around this. So again, if you haven't gone through that, I recommend it. It's a good way to get a baseline level of understanding. But as always, we're here to support and understand, help you. This is just a really high-level overview of the runway ahead of us. So on December 12th, Tennis New Zealand's constitution was adopted. Good little Christmas present to finish off the year. That came after a number of months of consultation with our regions. And as that position, that has triggered the regional tennis organisations, or RTOs, has opened their window. So they are now underway. For the clubs in Northland, recently adopted their new constitution. We know Canterbury have recently adopted their new constitution. So the RTOs are slowly ticking this through. Tennis Northern have theirs in a couple of weeks. You'll start to hear and have communications from your region and association around when they're planning to do so. And so that's their window. And then they should hopefully have all theirs done by 31 May, which gives you guys approximately a 12 to 15 month runway to have your adoption done and then re-registered before the April 6th deadline. Now, obviously, while you need to wait to adopt your constitution until your RTO has done theirs, you can begin the constitution drafting, which I know a number of you are, consulting with your members, asking questions like so tonight. So they can run in parallel, but you will just need to wait for your RTO to adopt theirs before you can adopt yours. So a good piece of sort of feedback is that if your usual AGM is in about August, September, we want you to try and use that rather than if you have to use an SGM. Work backwards from there. You should have about 2-month window. So try and give yourself 2 months from when you have a final club constitution ready to go out to your members and consult to give yourself a good runway. So you can work anywhere in that window. Very fast, very quick, and appreciate a lot of information in there. As I say, you're always welcome to jump on our Modernising Tennis Hub to get a little more detail or deeper understanding. There are previous recordings of these webinars as well. And as always, we're here for any specific questions you may have, if you would like to email us, etc. So, as I said, the purpose of this evening is to hear from you, to answer questions you may have or concerns or clarifications that we can provide. I'm happy now to throw it open to the floor. We'll do our best to manage everyone who's got their hand up or who's got a question. As I say, if you prefer, you can type it into the chat room and we can answer it as we go as well. So, who would like to kick us off?
Hey, Chris.
Martin, off
Um,
we go.
Thank you. So Martin from Power Tennis. I have a few questions for you. On 3.8, section G, we're not quite sure about the part that says they do not have any rights of ownership of or the right to use the property of the club or the applicable member organizations. That seems to contradict the earlier part in that piece. We're just wondering why it's there for.
I'll bring Chris in here. From a legal point of view, Chris, can you explain that one?
That is a good question, actually, and that may be an error. Of course, when you become a member of the club, one of the rights or benefits that you get in exchange for your membership fee is the use of the property. So let me take that one away. We may need to do a bit of a tidy up there.
Good start, Martin. You got us on the back foot early.
I'm not trying to get that, just trying to get clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And
Also,
obviously, the not having a right of ownership is pretty self-explanatory. But yes, that right to use may contradict the membership benefits that you get by being a member.
okay. The next question is 3.11, number F.
Yes.
So on our last meeting, that was said 2 months, but you've got 12 months here for individual casual members. And who's going to change this data at the club, or is this automatic through Club Spark?
So, first part of your question, when a casual books up, the product they book for, we class them as a casual because it's generally less than 2 months. That's your standard one to play. They would be on your list of members for 12 months. So they don't get the rights and access of that booking through that period. They're just on your database as a member of the club, a casual member for the 12-month period. That will drop off at the back end. So as your membership rolls over, that would drop them off out of the system automatically.
Okay, so you're saying that it's managed through Club Spark. So if they're in there, we don't have to worry about it. It will just be done in the back end.
Yeah, because their membership wouldn't renew, obviously, unless they repurchase a short-term product, a book a court, etc. And so they would drop off.
That's fine. Right, just a couple more
No problem.
questions. 3.5C.
Sorry, man, did you say 3.5C for Charlie?
Yes, yeah, upon the individual receiving confirmation. Now, how we, because we would want potentially the ability to say, no, we don't want you if we know someone is problematic. But the way that's worded, it seems that we don't have that ability.
Well, no, the member management system that's referred to there is your club member management system, and you have the option of designing how that works, however you see fit. You can actually write this clause any way you want to align with the mechanism that you have for receiving, considering, and responding to membership applications. What we were trying to reflect in 3.5C was that some people will have an automated system, particularly, for example, for casuals. They'll make a casual booking through the member management system, which is aligned to your court booking system, and you just get an automated acceptance and response. But short story is, you can configure the acceptance mechanism in 3.5 however you like.
So this is really all around using a management system, member management system.
It is written that way, but we do recognise that not everyone will have Club Spark, and not everyone obviously is required to. And so I think the guidance notes likely say that, and I'm just bringing them up. Yeah. if the guidance notes say if the club does not yet have an online member management system, then Rule 3.5C can be amended with the optional text which we have provided in the guidance note. So just check that one out.
Right. Okay, that's fine. I will do that.
The intent of having that automated piece in there, Martin, was because we also understand that clubs don't want to constitutionally have to sign off on every member who signs up. So it's that balance act between not wanting to do everybody, but also having the ability to pick up the ones you do want to pick up.
Okay, that makes sense. Then the other one, so my final question was around, and I'm trying to find my damn question now, was around having paid people not being on the committee. So our coach, for example, because she's obviously getting income from members, and she's on our committee, but how we read that is she wouldn't be able to be on the committee, or certainly a voting member. But if someone is in that position, but they're also a paid member, would they be able to use their paid membership to override the restrictions around having income? Because that would be hugely problematic for our club, and I would imagine a lot of clubs.
Which clause are you talking about, Mark?
I knew you were going to ask me that, because for the life of me, I can't actually pick it up.
Yeah. Actually, this I'll just have a look for it while we're talking. Do you mind if I take this one, Chris?
Yeah, of course.
This question came up last time as well, and the answer to your point is what's written in the template so far as excluding staff members, contracted coaches, and what have you, is a suggestion for managing conflicts of interest, but it's not a mandatory provision. We recognise that many clubs have people wearing more than one hat, and so you're free to amend that provision if you would like to. If, of course, you've got someone like a contracted coach or similar on your committee, then that's okay. You just need to make sure you've got the right conflict of interest procedures in place. So, for example, if the committee was making a decision about the terms of the contract with the coach, then if the coach is on the committee, that person should probably stand aside for that deliberation and any decision making on it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and we would do that anyway.
Yeah.
So there's no restrictions. We don't have to worry about that then.
No, what's in the template is a suggestion, but you are entitled to. You're free to amend that if you would like to.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's probably all my questions.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, guys.
Great questions to pass on. Aidan, you've got your hand raised so politely. We catch you in your car again, mate. How are you?
Yeah, no, just the same as last time, eh? Just drop the younger daughter off the gym and sit in the car park. But this is my second meeting today in my car, actually. So.
Mate, how can we help?
Thank you. So look, I've got just a couple of it's a good a couple of the questions I'm going to follow up on from those ones that we've just heard, actually. So again, the primary question is around sort of around membership. Just very quickly though, one just observation. This one's probably for Chris. While we were on clause rule 4, which we were just talking about there in terms of disqualification. If you're a paid employee, but you've explained that Chris explained there's some flexibility around that. I just an observation. I think in 4.1, I think that I think the template should be referring to officers, not committee members in that, just from the point of view of the legislation. Chris might want just to have a think about that, because not necessarily while every committee member is an officer, not necessarily every officer is a committee member, and I think the legislation's around consenting to be an officer rather than a committee member. Chris might just want to have a quick
okay, thanks, Aidan. You're talking about 4.1b.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just I don't think that's obviously not a particularly major one, but I think I think
there might be a tweak needed there, I think is what you're saying.
I think there is. Yeah, I've got to admit, and I'm probably not the only one. I know this got traversed a little bit, at the last meeting as well. I'm still pretty vexed by kind of what it means means to us as a club to be, essentially having every single person, who comes through and just pays to play even one session, sort of, even though they're a non-voting member of the club, right? I'm still a bit vexed by how this is all going to work in practice, because and there's a couple of things. First of all, there's that one reference to casual members in clause 3 somewhere, but that's not actually kind of defined anywhere. So it'd be interesting, that previous, whoever was asking questions previously, I think was it Martin, asked a question around casual members, about when they cease to be members. By casual, do you mean, so that's not actually explained. It's not actually a term that's used elsewhere or explained in the template. Do you mean just like Booker Court kind of members?
Yeah, so we reference casual members as anyone who uses a product that's less than 2 months. So in the back of the guidance notes, there is some blue text that outlines some examples of membership categories, and the casual members is kind of in there as well as a non-voting option. So you can reference that as well. But yeah, essentially it's those Booker Court, it's someone who might come along and utilize your venue once or twice.
It is just the sort of Booker, the Booker Court ones. It's still because, when somebody becomes a member, we obviously then have, we have certain obligations and whatever towards them, and it feels that someone who is just purely attending on a pay to play basis, right? It feels like that's just if anything, just going to make more work. And I'm just not sure what, as a club, we get out. I mean, I totally understand that they would need to be a member of Tennis New Zealand to be covered by sort of national kind of, policies and sort of conduct. But I'm just sort of concerned about how that's actually going to play out in practice, and is that just going to create, quite a bit of hassle for clubs? Just being able to distinguish, in our club Spark system exactly what, we've got so many more categories. You're not just a paid voting member anymore. You can now be a non-voting member. Some of those non-voting members might be from casual play. Some of them might be parents or guardians. I mean, I don't know, what. I just think I just sort of vexed by really how that's going to actually work out. I mean, is it going to know that they're just a pay-to-play person and then, register them automatically as a non-voting member in our Club Spark? It sounds like Club Spark's going to even have to know what's in our constitutions to know how to categorize these different people who sign in and come and play on a court. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I mean, maybe these things would just sort of come out in the wash, a little bit. But I'm concerned that it's going to create hassle for us, and it's not clear what the benefit is.
Yeah, it's a fair question, Aidan. Chris doesn't know this, and he may beat me afterwards for creating work for him, but it's come up in another conversation I had this afternoon, as a result of which I think we should produce a short guide or explanatory note. What does it mean to be an individual casual member, non-voting member, and what are the practical implications of that, and how does the club organise itself around that? If we did a 1 or 2 pager just to give our thoughts on that, and that we would maybe issue to you guys as a draft and get your feedback, would that be helpful?
I mean, I think it would, but it's also, how are these things going to be, someone just signs in through our club website, they register through the club website just so they can use Booker Court. Yep. Right, there's going to be some mechanism first of all, they're going to need to consent to be a member of our club. When they do that, we then need them to be registered in in our code of Club Spark in a way that's easily identifiable, that they're like a non-voting member rather than a voting member, so we know who we're sending information to when it comes to AGMs or or that kind of thing. It's just it's just kind of questions around that. There's just
Chris, I mean, subject to your comment, I think we should come back with a 1 or 2 pager on that. In essence, you're right. They consent to become they apply to become a member. They consent to be bound by the rules and policies of the club and any applicable rules and policies of the RTO and TNZ. And then so far as and that's their primary, if not only, obligation, and their rights are to, because we're talking about parents of junior members, predominantly, and their rights are as described by you in your terms and conditions. One of the other things that's on my mind, that again, Chris Mundell, you and I should have a chat about, is whether it would be useful for us to produce for clubs a set of template terms and conditions, which this issue would dovetail
Is there,
with.
yeah, I mean, is there a risk that it's actually going to put people off just going to pay? They just want to book a court. They want to pay $10 and book a court for half an hour, and suddenly they're like, "What? You mean I've got to become a member? I've got to agree to this and that?" And they just go like, "Oh, sod that." I don't, it's not what some of
Yeah,
them might be expecting.
no, I understand the point. That said, when I book a court at the Renoff Tennis Centre, as I frequently do, I have to either complete the booking online or on a piece of paper, and I have to consent to be bound by the rules and procedures that apply at the
But okay,
centres.
fair enough. I mean,
So, and that's pretty standard these days. So I don't think it's a
yeah.
big step from that kind of thing.
Sorry, I don't want to labour the point. I'll take it up. I just that's still the one area in my mind is the secretary
Yeah,
for for out of Miramar that I'm vexed by, and is it going to create work for no obvious
yeah,
return? That's my only concern.
yep,
Just
yep.
quickly,
Okay,
and I agree, and we don't want to we will move on to the next question, but from a Club Spark point of view, the length of product offered. So when you set up membership, generally you have a start date and end date, 12-month membership, September 1 to whatever, to August 31st. With those booker courts, they will fall under that less than 2-month category because it's just a one-off user, or puts them straight into your casual participants group. So yeah, to Chris's point, some information around how that's actually going to work.
and how it's going to work in Club Spark. Do you know what I mean? How it's actually going to play out, once Club Spark gets the necessary upgrade, so we know how it's going to kind of interface with our club database of members and how they're going to show up. Thank you. Sorry, taking up too much time.
No problem, Adam. No problem. Really appreciate it. Next, who's got a question for us? I'm just reading through the questions on the chat here as well. Some have been asked. Great. Sarah, do we have a code of conduct? Yes, Tennis New Zealand still have a code of conduct. On our website, you can do that, and through our tennis participant protection policy.
How is that referred to in the Constitution?
In the club constitution?
It just seems odd to now have two different documents. So you don't, in the template, you don't say as per our code of conduct. Or, do you know what I mean? They're kind of, now it feels like you've separated things.
In the
Where are you looking, Sarah?
Sorry, I have to flick back, just looking. So sorry.
no problem.
I was putting in my questions and going ahead.
We caught you off.
Yeah. Code of conduct. So much. Let me find it. Go, hang on. Code.
No worries. Take your time.
Of, I must be able to put it in find and find it. Code.
While you're doing that, I can answer the other questions. Why do we need 2.1E as part of the Constitution? That clause refers to the club being a member of the applicable RTO or LTP and Tennis New Zealand. And the reason for that is because we're seeking to implement, this is one of the key planks of the modernising tennis proposals, is to make every part of the system linked up through membership. So club belongs to LTP, LTP belongs to club, to RTO, and RTO belongs to TNZ.
I can see that you would like that, but I'm chary about having that as part of my constitution, because should we no longer wish to be part of Tennis Northern or Tennis New Zealand because we don't think you offer sufficient for the fees you charge, I don't want to have to change our constitution in order to have the members vote on that. I feel that the constitution should be about the club, and our choice to be a membership should be that, a choice, because you are a great thing to have.
And a service. You're providing a service, not only.
Yeah, and understand the point.
Have a think. You don't have to answer now.
Well, there's I can answer it now, as you would like me to. And the answer is, each club will need to form its own view. Obviously, we think there is value in being part of the system and being a member of Tennis New Zealand. And one of the things that we're, as I say, seeking to achieve is to get everybody joined up. If a club doesn't believe that there is benefit or value for the cost, then it all has freedom of choice. But the default position that we're seeking to put in place is that everyone's joined up.
So I think you've missed my point entirely.
Oh yeah.
We are members of Tennis Northern and Tennis New Zealand because today we see value in it.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want that to be a part of our constitution. We want
Mm-hmm.
that to be a choice every year because of the great service you offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want that. You said at the beginning, the feedback was there's too much about what suits you guys. And I think it's really important that we all feel we have a choice about you, not an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clearer about the difference between the answer you gave and the point we're trying to make?
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, if I may interrupt, I'm just saying you're providing a service, and therefore it should not be in the Constitution. It's an optional service.
Well,
Constitutions are basic rules.
yeah, no, I understand the point. I guess we just have a different philosophical view. We don't think it's a service provision arrangement. It's a national sport, national membership proposition. The difference between us, if there is one, is I hear you would like to make the decision year by year. Even if you have this provision baked into your constitution, you can still do that. You would just need to amend your constitution and get the requisite majority of your members. But I understand your point. As I say, our philosophy is that there's real value in us all being joined up, so far as information and policy and service and a few other things. But if you have a different view, then you do have freedom of action.
Okay. Yeah, sorry we can't get to an understanding on that. So my first point was 2.1D, the purpose, capacities and powers. You were talked about protecting, promoting the safety and well-being of participants, integrity, including the high standards of conduct. So why are we referring to high standards of conduct and separately have a code of conduct? Why doesn't it refer to the code of conduct or the club's code of conduct?
We could do. This is obviously a statement of purpose and principles rather than reference to specific policies or other documents. And actually, if I made my point slightly better, many clubs will give effect to this statement of principle through their code of conduct. But if you want to refer to your code of conduct specifically in 2.1D, then there's no problem with doing
no
that.
problem.
You're welcome to do it.
Super. Then in purposes, unless I've missed something, we have in our constitution that it's to provide tennis courts and grounds and to prepare and maintain and a whole load of stuff about that. And in fact, probably half of our committee meetings is about talking about the courts, the grounds, etc.
Yeah.
But you don't seem to have any reference to the provision of courts or grounds. And I was just interested in the background to that.
Jump in, Chris, if you have a different recollection.
Yeah.
But the short point is you can rewrite this here however you want. If you want to refer to making facilities, etc., available, there's no problem with doing that. Actually, I would agree. Probably the template should include reference to that. There are some clubs who don't have facilities. There's a few virtual clubs.
Cool. Actually, that's the answer I was looking for. Are there virtual clubs? Okay, then that explains it.
Yeah, I think in essence what we intended with that wording is to keep it broad to enable a wide range of purposes. Obviously, depending on how you interpret those words could be around the provision, how you deliver the sport would be the provision of the courts and facilities. So, yeah, if you'd like to be more explicit, as Chris said, you're welcome to amend that. We kept it broad to start with.
Yeah, I hadn't realised anyone had a virtual club. I thought it was all physical play. What does a virtual club do?
Organise at other facilities.
They play at other facilities, either regional tennis centres or public courts or those sorts of things.
Super, thanks.
Just moving through here, some of the questions. Jackie's one around, does the template accommodate multiple sports, e.g. tennis and squash? So short answer here, Jackie, we are working with Squash New Zealand on a specific squash tennis rackets club template. We are expecting that on our desk today. There has been a delay from that, but yeah, we're expecting that. And then we have had some clubs who are looking at things like pickle or paddle or beach tennis, etc. They are now included in the definition of tennis that we have broadened. So if those are your areas that we're looking at, that is covered in tennis. If you're looking at cross code, your club has a netball club and a tennis club, then yeah, certainly reach out to us and we can support you through what that's going to look like. For the racket club specifically, we are working with squash on that one. That's the club's register.
You're cracking up. Is anyone else
Cracking up, Chris?
Problems?
Yeah, I am too. While Chris is reconnecting, there's a question here. I can't see any reference to a minimum number of members. Is this not a requirement under the Act? The answer to that question is yes, and the minimum is 10.
Thank you.
No worries.
Chris, if you can hear me, do you want to answer Jim Bevan from Cora's question there around the register of members?
Yeah, the digital.
Register of members takes. Yeah, let me just read it. Yeah. Yeah, why does it require a digital interface? Good question, Jim. Process for approval is just engagement with Chris. And why does it require a digital interface? Actually, we're being practical in the you'll be pleased to know in the first instance, we recognize that not everyone has a digital member management system. The key driver is that we have a national database which all the information can be drawn into. In the first instance, if you want to send a spreadsheet, which would be obviously digital, and the information which can be absorbed into the database, then that would be fine. Over time, we want to build to the point where everyone's digital member management system is an online one and just has a direct interface to the national database, so that there's a one-stop shop for information, and so that clubs can access their information. But we recognise that that may take a little time. Does that answer your question, Jim?
Hopefully you can all hear me, but yes, to Jim's question, at the moment, clubs have the ability to upload via an Excel spreadsheet into the national portal, which is that straight-up digital interface. Over time, we will work with the Club Spark, as obviously the Helen club pay-to-plays. Soho would need us to work with you directly, Jim, as we discussed. That's what we're taking a pragmatic approach around doing.
Does Club Spark belong to you or to us?
No, Club Spark doesn't belong to either. So Club Spark is a third-party provider that we have an agreement with to provide our clubs the service. The service has a subscription that we pick up the bill for any tennis clubs in New Zealand. You are welcome to choose other membership management providers. We obviously recommend Club Spark, because it's free and it links directly into our national database, but it's not our product. It is a third-party provider.
Thank you.
International.
Martin, you've been waiting so patiently. Appreciate with the hand up. You jump in.
Thank you. Section 9, the club manager. So we don't have a club captain. He does a lot of roles, but it's all voluntarily. If it's not so much day to day, but he's on the boat. And for us to turn around and say, well, sorry, now you can't do that with all of the effort put in, seems really wrong. And it's almost like this club manager, it sort of makes it seem very corporate. So is this a mandatory thing? I mean, do we have to do it, or we
No.
can stay?
No, so that whole provision is if your club essentially has a paid club manager. If your club doesn't have one and you use a club captain, then you can remove that entire section and the references to it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else have a question they want to jump?
Could we just go back?
Oh, sorry,
Just,
sir.
someone had pointed out that in section 4 that you called it officers and then you referred to committee members, and then someone said something like not all committee members are officers, or not all officers are committee members. I can't remember what they said, but could you just talk around that for a second? I thought officers and committee members were interchangeable as terms.
They are. So I think the point that was being made was not all officers are committee members. That the definition of officer is broader than committee member, and maybe there's a tweak to the drafting required in 4.1b. I think, and the point practically is 4.1 says the committee member has to certify they're not disqualified from being an officer, and in 4.1b, the reference to committee member probably should be officer, first point. And secondly, question is whether any other officer should also be required to certify. So we'll take away that point and have a think about it.
Yeah. Right.
Can I just clarify exactly what is an officer? Is that someone who is a treasurer, secretary, or president?
It's what is defined under the Act. If we go to, actually, there's a definition also in the template. It means the president, committee members. Then you have the option of inserting other positions which are in a decision-making role. For example, a chief executive or general manager would be an officer, and any other individual defined as an officer under the Act. If your next question is what is the definition of officer under the Act, then I will just look that up while Chris talks to the next question.
Yeah, just while Chris does that, Jim from Woodend. So last session we mentioned the considerable difference between the suggested Squash New Zealand Constitution and the TNZ version. Theirs is a lot simpler, which made me think ours is overcomplicated and geared to trying to individual clubs TNZ. Why can't we use a simpler version? So when I was referring to that, Jim, what I was meaning was Squash have not added any of these modernising tennis elements in. The system-wide membership, the digital connectivity, etc. So their template doesn't have those pieces in it. So from a user point of view for their squash and racket clubs, that's the simpler one. Because ours has those in it, it's easier for them to add ours to theirs to ours than the other way around. So that's the process they're working through at the moment around incorporating the specific squash elements into the TNZ side of things, so that our racket clubs can have both.
Thanks, Chris. Back on that previous question, the Act defines an officer to be a person who is a member of the committee or a person occupying a position in the society, in this case club, that allows the person to exercise significant influence over the management or administration of the society. For example, a treasurer or a chief executive. That's in the definition section 5 of the Act. If you go to Appendix 2 of the guidance notes, you will see set out the obligations of an officer under the Act. And, best practice would probably be when someone is appointed to the committee or appointed to be general manager and so on, they should be given a copy of that and acknowledge them so that they're, we're ensuring they are aware of the obligations and duties they take on under the Act.
Yes, thank you.
Chris, secretary can be ex officio.
Sorry?
Secretary can be ex officio. There's a question from Sandy.
What does ex officio mean? Without office? Do you mean an enthusiastic volunteer? Yes, a secretary can be that, and frequently is. And your question then would be, would a person serving in that capacity be an officer of the club? The answer would be yes if that person is on the committee, and no if he or she is not. Because unless she or he is on the committee, they're not exercising it. Sorry.
Yeah, Chris, I read this in the New Zealand ASA newsletter, and they meant that you could actually contract this completely out of your membership base.
Contract what out, sorry?
The secretarial role.
Oh, sure. Well, you don't have to have a secretary, but, you know, generally it's thought useful. Someone's got to take the minutes at meetings and such.
But yes, you can contract that out, Andy.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one, if I may.
You can, John.
Yeah, I'm from Nutteringa Tennis Club in Devonport, and I've been endeavouring to amend our club's constitution for a number of years. Each club has to comply with the constitutions of Tennis New Zealand and Tennis Northern. What happens if a club at a AGM or SGM passes a constitution, amended constitution, which in one way or another does not comply with the constitutions of Tennis Northern or Tennis New Zealand? Are clubs expected to submit their draft constitutions to those two bodies for approval or tick off before we do that? Or later we were requested to amend our constitutions? Can you just elaborate that for me, please?
Chris, do you want me to have a go at that one?
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Two parts to the answer to that one, John. First is if you amend your constitution or pass a constitution that doesn't meet the requirements under the Tennis Northern or TNZ constitution, then technically you're in breach of your member obligation. Second part of your, and that would likely result in some kind of discussion. Second part of the answer is, are you required to submit your constitution to Tennis Northern for approval? While, just to make sure I get that answer to that question right, let me look up I'll bring up the constitution while Chris talks to the next question.
Because that saves a lot of drama later on if there's either present or deliberate, and many clubs may not have the ability or advice given to them to cope with those issues. And, there are 55-page constitutions or so for both those two other organisations, and it's hard reading for some people.
Appreciate the concern, John. We really. While Chris points that out, in essence, if you're, as he said, if your constitution doesn't comply, you'd be outside of the constitution, which would probably most likely, if you were to determine to stick with whatever changes you wanted to make and it didn't align with the rest of the constitutions, you'd become an unaffiliated club, which obviously the challenge with that is that you risk the ability to get grant funding as a result.
So while you were talking, the way around it, of course, is that we can just have some regulations, which, as I understand, do they have to be approved by the two other organisations? The club's individual regulations. That's the detail of running the club, and you don't want to put that into a constitution because you don't want to have to amend the constitution.
Yeah, no, exactly. The club the template club constitution says you're free to adopt regulations if you want to, and that certainly doesn't require our approval. If your question is, John, I'm looking while you were talking, I'm looking at the template RTO constitution. The obligations of club members of Tennis Northern, for example, is to have a constitution which complies. It doesn't actually say you have to submit that to Tennis Northern for approval, but if you wanted to run it past them to check that it's compliant, then I'm sure they would have a look and give you advice on that.
Thank you, because some other clubs may want to do that as well. So
yeah, and that of course is one of the benefits of using the template, amended as you see fit, as outlined in the guidance notes, because it gives you a high level of confidence that it will be compliant.
Thank you.
There's a question that just popped up about minimum membership. And the point that's made is, I mentioned earlier a minimum of 10 under the Act, and somewhere there's a reference to 20. You're right. We debated this amongst ourselves at some length. We have for basically the position under the templates is for existing clubs that have been grandfathered into the system, the minimum is 10 as provided in the Act. For new clubs that seek to join in the future, the minimum will be 20, because we reached the view that a club that has 11 members is probably not viable. And we would like clubs to strengthen and be generally viable in the future. So that's the reason for the reference to 20 members.
Chris, do officer details, new officers or deletion of retired officers have to be updated on the register each year?
Have to be updated on the what, sorry?
Society's register each year?
Members?
No. Details.
No, the officers.
Well, the officers do.
Yeah.
Yes, but members no.
Yeah. Any other questions from the floor or in the chat? I'm just scrolling through my...
I don't know whether it's smart writing, but don't we need something in the Constitution about the members' rights to access any information that we hold on them? Or is that covered because it's a law under the Privacy Act?
In the Act.
It is in the Act.
And that's why you choose not to put it in there. It's just we've got it in there at the moment.
Yeah, and you're free to include it if you would like to. One of the...
But actually...
Sorry. No, you go.
I was just going to say, but actually what you're saying is because it's covered, there's no need to write it.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Chris, I just had a question there that I posed about the association indemnity insurance, whether that was something that most clubs were considering.
Yeah, I'm interested in that point too.
Chris, are many clubs considering indemnity insurance? Their committees as per the recommendation, huge expense and needs careful consideration. Is that a question for us, Andy, or are you asking more clubs around the room?
Well, I know it's a recommendation that's come from you guys, and it's something that I've had a few discussions with, but I've got some prices, and you can go from $500 to $1,000 to be covered for that. So it's just a major concern that we have. I mean, we have currently in our constitution what we call a relief of committee, which absolves us from those legal obligations as part of, that's the clause that we currently have. And I wondered whether we could still have that clause and not worry about the association insurance indemnity.
All 11.5 of the template says that the club is authorised to indemnify officers under the Act or affect insurance. So the purpose of that provision is to make it clear that the club has the power to do that if it chooses to. It's not obliged to do so. Does that answer the question, or is there another part to it?
Yeah, it does, because I mean, I think it's a major concern from the Tennis Northern clubs that when we've had a discussion around it, that it's the cost is prohibitive. Yeah.
So
yeah,
what happens? Go on.
I was just going to say it's a difficult one because there's concern or tension the other way as well, with the responsibilities of officers and directors and committee members, etc., increasing over time, and they do under the new act. There's room for concern that it may be harder to attract people into those roles. And I mean, speaking for myself, I'm a professional director, and I don't accept any appointment unless I get a comprehensive indemnity and we're backed up by directors and officers and insurance. Now, it's not the same necessarily for a club committee, but that's kind of the concern on the other side. But as I say, under 11.5, you have the power to do those things, but you don't have an obligation to.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions there? See, where is the reference to 20 members? I didn't pick it up in the draft. Yeah, sorry. So thank you, Jenny, for answering that one. It is noted in the TNZ constitution.
Yeah.
20 member clubs as those wishing to apply.
Can I just make an observation? A lot of work's been gone into doing this club template constitution. And I'd like to express my appreciation on behalf of our club, and I'm sure others, of providing this for us instead of having to go to different firms of lawyers or stand on your head and doing it. And we've been ironing out a few bits and pieces, but basically, I think someone spent a lot of time on this, and I like to say that's really appreciated.
I think that's a really good. It's a really good point, John. It would be an absolute nightmare to do it without help.
Yeah, appreciate it, John. And that's one of our key roles there around the value we provide is the support. We appreciate that 400 odd clubs around the country don't all have lawyers on the committees, don't all have time, resource, or understanding. So, as the national body, we felt it appropriate not only because we were making some changes that would filter throughout the system, but also we felt it appropriate that we should support our clubs through this process by giving them as much resource as we can. So, yes, Chris, I'll tip my hat to Chris Hall here, who has spent hours on this constitution, not this one, but our one and the RTO one. So, appreciate the sentiment there, John.
And thank you, Chris.
No, not at all. No, it's been a team effort, but we did. The feedback and the improvement opportunities that you were raising are very welcome. We did spend most of last year developing this together with the RTO, LTP, and TNZ templates. We appreciate they're not perfect, and so the feedback is really welcome, and we'll all benefit from the changes that come out of these sorts of discussions.
Any other questions from the floor before I let everyone get back to their evening?
Yeah.
Yes, jump in.
Yeah, it's Jim Bucknell from Woodend.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, look, just the thing about the 20 members, you said if it's an existing club like we are, we wouldn't be bound by the fact that we had to have 20 members.
No, so you're right. So as an existing club, you need to have 10 members under the Act to remain incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can get grandfathered across into the new system with however many members you have. If a new club was to be developed in a new suburb somewhere and they wish to apply to become a member, the TNZ constitution states they need to have 20, to Chris's point earlier around sustainability and growth of the club. So as long as you have 10, you'll be okay at the moment to remain incorporated and remain a member club.
My previous point about which you sort of touched on, but you didn't go right through it, about the Constitution, the Tennis New Zealand being quite complicated, or, is there any reason why we can't just update our existing Constitution in a simple way, and then you just use the connections that we got with Canterbury Tennis and Tennis New Zealand as we have at the moment.
Chris, do you want to jump in there from a constitutional point of view?
Yeah, that would be nice, Jim. Unfortunately, the new Act is much more prescriptive than the old one. So, we've endeavoured to keep the thing to reasonable length. But it's, as Chris said at the beginning, it's longer than most clubs have today. That's a reflection of the prescription under the Act and the fact that we've worked hard to ensure that the constitutions at each level of the sport, club, LTP, RTO, TNZ, are all consistent. And we're also working on constitutions for Aotearoa Maori tennis and for New Zealand Masters. So they all need to be part of a consistent set. Therefore, unfortunately, the answer to your question is no. We did think carefully about that. It would have been nice, but wasn't really practical.
Yeah, okay.
Chris, I just have one question about clubs that may not necessarily be focused on this just yet, but perhaps need a bit of encouragement.
Go ahead, Fraser.
What in a 10-second soundbite, what's the best way to describe what would happen to a club if they decide to bury their head in the sand?
Obviously, hopefully, that's not the case, and we want to try and communicate as much as we can to get all those clubs across the line. But if they buried their head in the sand and did not re-register a compliant constitution before the April 6th deadline, they would not be registered under the Incorporated Societies Act and would fail to be that standard. And they could still do it at a later time, but there's obviously a little more arduous process through that. They would also then fall out of the system that we're creating. From a tennis club point of view, they would be unaffiliated to Tennis Otago and to Tennis New Zealand.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
No worries.
And the practical consequence of that is, it sort of goes to they wouldn't be paying affiliation fees and they wouldn't be receiving services from the other components of the system.
And they also wouldn't have the protection of being an incorporated society. So each member could be liable for various responsibilities and financial issues.
Yeah, exactly right, Jim.
It's a definite advantage of being incorporated.
It's worth noting, Fraser, something for your clubs. I am doing this process for my own club. And used our guidance notes in the template draft and have worked through it, appreciating that I probably have a little more knowledge and understanding of the conversations at every club. But it has taken me probably 2 hours to go through with the guidance notes and the template and put in what I think the club wants, etc. Now that's to get it to a position where I can present it to the committee and go from there. So it's not huge if you have the understanding of the club you're after and if you use the guidance notes and step your way through it. But if there are clubs who might feel that it's just a bridge too far or a burden, Fraser, just reach out to us and we can support you guys to help them.
Great. Yes, I'm involved both at club level and at the association level, and so I'm looking at it from two angles. I think some clubs will just need a bit of a helping hand. Will there be similar sessions like this after the 1st of June, or in June, July?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll go. So this was our second one of the year. We'll post this up in the next couple of days, as well as all the questions that have been asked and some answers written for those. So you can go back and review those. We'll then circle around, Fraser, around what our next rollout of support looks like for clubs in the space. As we know, we're working with the RTOs at the moment to get their constitutions across. They'll be talking to their clubs around what that process looks like and having that set up. And so we'll be working with them around more bespoke and extended support for clubs as we head through that process.
Right. Thank you.
Fraser, not necessarily we want to club, for want of a better word, people with this provision, but if you look at the transition rules under the Act, this is in one of the schedules, if Rule 12, consequence of not re-registering by the end of the transition period is that the society, in this case club, ceases to exist as a legal entity.
Hopefully we can avoid that, Fraser, with most of our clubs.
That's the plan.
Certainly hope so.
Thanks everyone for their time. Really appreciate the contributions and the feedback. As I say, we'll put this video up today or so. We'll support it with the questions and answers that we can refer back to it. If you've ever got any more detailed questions or queries that you'd like, please phone through to myself here at TNZ New Zealand. We're always happy to support. But yeah, again, appreciate it and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.